Ted Bundy was a serial killer who murdered at least 30 women in the 1970s. He was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, and was raised by his grandparents in Philadelphia. As a teenager, Bundy was reportedly shy and introverted, and he struggled with feelings of inadequacy and social isolation. In the late 1960s, Bundy moved to the Pacific Northwest and began attending college. It was around this time that he began committing his first murders. He would often prey on young women, luring them into his car and then assaulting and killing them. Bundy was eventually caught and arrested in 1978, and he was sentenced to death in 1979. While in prison, he admitted to committing over 30 murders, although it is believed that the actual number may be higher. Bundy was executed by electric chair on January 24, 1989. He has become one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, and his case has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and movies. This is his story.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
That's the question of the hour.
Bundy described his childhood as unhappy and tumultuous. His grandfather was a violent and abusive man. Despite this, Bundy excelled academically and was considered a model student. He was intelligent and ambitious, but he struggled with feelings of inadequacy and social isolation. He was also known to be shy and introverted, and he often felt isolated from his peers. He also worked as a volunteer at a suicide prevention hotline, which gave him access to vulnerable individuals and helped him hone his manipulative tactics. This paved the way for his murders that he would soon commit.
Have you ever physically harmed anyone?
Ever physically harmed anyone? No. No. You know, again, not in the context I think that you're speaking of.
There is no consensus as to when or where Bundy began killing women. He told different stories to different people and refused to divulge the specifics of his earliest crimes. Although, Bundy's earliest documented homicides were committed in 1974, when he was 27 years old. His first documented murders would occur in Oregon. Roberta Kathleen Parks was the fifth of many victims of Ted. Roberta was born in Lakewood, Ohio in 1957. She went to Acalanes High School in California, then graduated and went to Diablo Valley College. Finally, she moved to Oregon to pursue her education in Oregon State University in 1973. Before her disappearance, Roberta seemed to be unhappy. She was in constant arguments with her parents, had relationship problems with her boyfriend, and she didn't know what to do for her future career. On May 6, 1974, Roberta seemed to be extremely emotional and stressed. That was the day she was abducted by Bundy. She was last seen walking between her dorm at Sackett Hall and the Commons area of the Memorial Union Building. According to Bundy, Roberta was lonely and depressed. He convinced Roberta to accompany him into Corvallis for food and drinks. Once they were in the car, Bundy said he had to collect his thesis from a nearby typist. He drove out to the area he would attack her. He raped her 3 times and then killed her. After, he drove 5 hours and dumped her on the side of a remote mountain, east of Seattle. Her skull was found in Taylor Mountain. Making her his 5th victim, she was only 20 years old. Laura Ann M. was born in Salem, Utah in 1957. She attended North San Pete High School. On October 31, 1974, she went to a Halloween party with her friends. Later that night she left alone. Shortly before the party, Laura dropped out of high school and became a runaway. Yet, she still kept contact with her family. She was a girl who was trying to figure out her life. She had a transient nature personality. A month later after the party, on November 26, 2 hikers discovered her body on the side of an embankment in American Fork Canyon in Utah. According to investigators, she was beat up, raped, and was strangled to death. In January of 1989, Ted Bundy confessed to the crime. Though there is not enough information and details when it comes to her case. Many accounts contradict each other about where she was that night. However, a number of sources state she knew Ted Bundy before the incident. He would go to the cafe Laura and her friends hang out in and talk to them. On one occasion he stood in front of Laura and told her that he was gonna rape her. She was abducted in Ted Bundy's Volkswagen and later became his 12th victim. Laura was 17. It seemed as if the Pacific Northwest was never safe as long as Ted was around. He was a truly sick individual. He didn't mind killing young girls along with the young women he preyed on. Lynette Culver was another poor soul who happened to go missing around the time Ted was loose. Lynette Culver was born in Rento, Washington in 1962. She was a 12-year-old student and attended Alameda Junior High School in Pocatello, Idaho. On May 6, 1975, Culver was abducted from her neighborhood. Although certain details differ between sources, Culver was reportedly last seen at school. A few of her classmates stated that she left campus during lunch and others say she was seen taking the bus home. However, many believe that she most likely disappeared involuntarily from her home, seeing as she didn't really have a good relationship with her family and struggled with her grades. When Bundy got caught, he finally confessed to murdering her, but her remains have never been found. Bundy stated he raped Culver in a hotel room right after kidnapping her. He then drowned her to get rid of evidence, disposing of her body in a river north of Pocatello. He did provide some convincing details, but authorities did not fully accept his claims because her body was nowhere to be found. While Bundy provides specific details to make many people believe his confession was genuine, Lynette's body was never found, and in the years following her disappearance, 4 other girls from Pocatello ended up becoming victims of unsolved murders. To this day it is unknown whether Bundy really did play a part in these murders. Ted Bundy's final documented victim also happened to be his youngest victim, Kimberly Leach. Kimberly Diane Leach was born in Lake City, Florida in 1965. She was a 12-year-old student, a 7th grader at Lake City Middle School. One day, on February 9, 1978, she was called to the school's office to retrieve her purse that she had left in another classroom. After retrieving her purse and on her way back to her classroom, she was intercepted by serial killer Ted Bundy. That same day, Bundy had previously attempted to kidnap another middle schooler, but when he was stopped by the child's older brother, he made his second attempt where he found Kimberly Leach walking to the main office by herself. He quickly overpowered her and forced her into his car. 7 weeks later, in April 1978, her body was found in a shed in a wooded area behind Sewanee River State Park. The autopsy determined that Kimberly had been sexually assaulted, raped, and had her throat had been cut. 41 years later, one of Kimberly's childhood friends, Lisa Little, spoke out and said that Kimberly should be remembered as an innocent young girl that would have done great things in this world. And not to remember the monster which was Ted Bundy. He was finally caught on February 15, 1978, in which Bundy was pulled over by Officer David Lee on West Cervantes Street for driving a stolen car. Bundy resisted arrest, leading Officer Lee to fire 2 warning shots. Bundy decided to represent himself during his trial in June 1979 for the murders of the two Chi Omega sisters who had been murdered. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by an electric chair. Bundy then went on trial in Orlando for the murder of Kimberly Leach in 1980. For this, he was also found guilty and sentenced to death.
One of the most important as you come down to perhaps your final hours, are you thinking about all those victims out there and their families who are so wounded, you know, years later, their lives have not returned to normal. They will never return to normal.
Absolutely.
Are you carrying that load, that weight? Is the remorse there?
Again, I know that people will accuse me of being self-serving, but we're beyond that now. I mean, I'm just telling you how I feel. But through God's help, I have been able to come to the point where much too late, but better late than never, feel the hurt and the pain that I am responsible for. Yes, absolutely. In the past few days, myself and a number of investigators have been talking about unsolved cases, murders that I was involved in. And it's hard to talk about all these years later because it revives in me all those terrible feelings and those thoughts that I have steadfastly and diligently dealt with, and I think successfully, with the love of God. With me, going beyond retribution and punishment, because there is no way in the world that killing me is going to restore those beautiful children to their parents and correct and soothe the pain. But I'll tell you, there are lots of other kids playing in streets around this country today who are going to be dead tomorrow and the next day and the next day and next month because other young people are reading the kinds of things and seeing the kinds of things that are available in the media today.
Ted, as you would imagine, there's tremendous cynicism about you on the outside, and I suppose for good reason. I'm not sure that there's anything that you could say that people would believe. Some people would believe.
Yeah.
And yet, you told me last night, and I have heard this through our mutual friend John Tanner, that you have accepted the forgiveness of Jesus Christ and are a follower and a believer in Him. Do you draw strength from that as you approach these final hours?
I do. I can't say that
It's going to be
being
easy.
in the valley of the shadow of death is something that I've become all that accustomed to, and that I'm strong and nothing's bothering me. Listen, it's no fun. It gets kind of lonely, and yet I have to remind myself that every one of us will go through this someday, in one way or another.
It's appointed unto man.
And countless millions who have walked this earth before us have. So this is just an experience which we all share. And
Yeah.
right on.
While he awaited his death sentence, Bundy was incarcerated in a series of prisons in Florida. He was initially held in Rayford Prison, but was later transferred to the Florida State Prison in Stark. While in prison, Bundy was kept in isolation due to the high-profile nature of his case and the fear that he would be targeted by other inmates. Despite being isolated, Bundy was able to continue his legal appeals and received regular visits from his attorneys. However, after several years of appeals, Bundy's death sentence was upheld and he was eventually executed in the electric chair in 1989. Ted Bundy was truly the living epitome of evil, a sly, manipulative man who was always capable of getting his way. The country celebrated the monster's death. Parents and children could go to sleep feeling just a little more safe from the vile man that was Ted Bundy.
That's a very good question. And I'll answer very honestly. I don't want to die. I'm not going to kid you. I'll kid you not. I deserve certainly the most extreme punishment society has, and I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me, that's for sure.